Let's get started. Today's actually going to be today and yesterday are almost like the crux of the answer, of getting to like what I called in the beginning perspective change. So let's, You should have two of the papers. Yesterday we had number 13 and today is number 14. Yes. So you should have both of them. So finish off yesterday's and go into today. So let's give a little bit of a recap. You had them both? Yeah. Okay. So yesterday we discussed it's all in the head, right? We highlighted two areas where, although it seems like it's impossible, it's not for me, we demonstrated how time and time again we find that it's not true. We decided and we created these mental blocks that don't allow us to go beyond the block that we put ourselves into. But it's not a real block. It's not a natural block. The concept of I'm not made for that is just not true. How do you know? Usually, it can be traced back to perhaps a weakness that we have in the sense of it's not as much as my strength as perhaps some other behavior patterns that I do have. So therefore, I just make the conclusion it's not mine. But I can develop it. I can slowly tap into it and it will become me. So why am I simply saying it's not me? It's not true. And we talked about the power of rotzon. Rotzon in Hebrew is desire, passion, where a person has the ability to untap reserves that are within him. Not only the cash, but also the reserves within us. And this brought out a little bit of a discussion on how each and every single one of us were created with 10 different behavior patterns or ways how we express ourselves. Some of us have them in a sense, more they're more obvious. And I gave the example of a Flintstone versus a fire versus a spark. Some of them we have that spark. Some of them have to unleash that spark. But let's not underestimate a person who's able to unleash that spark. It's a powerful spark. The power there is incomparable because you developed it. You brought it out. That strength, that perseverance that a person has in unleashing it and untapping that reserve brings us to the idea of owner versus renter that we spoke about a little bit. That's where everything flows and all the information. The student. Where is a student? Where is a student in hunger? That's where we see a student. What does a student do? A student is able to connect. When is he able to connect? What's the moment of connection? When he's able to go beyond just sitting there. He's asking. And those questions that he has, those are the moments that he connects. So when we connect with ourselves, really we're connecting more with ourselves when we're actually hitting those obstacles that are in front of us. So this was all yesterday what we spoke about. The power of passion, the power of a person. Where do we bring it out? We brought it out in class number 13, the paper in front of you. It's number 2, 3, 4, and 5. Number 2, I talked about ourselves, the strengths, the weaknesses, the disabilities, the challenges that befall us. So the strength, we talked about a person has to recognize the strengths. We talked about a person has to recognize the weaknesses are not inherent. They're not cemented. They're not just there. They're actually areas that we can develop. Disabilities, we talked about how even when a person has a disability, you can see how you can change your perspective on that person. They can have a super sensitivity in some other area. So, hey, it's not really this ability. It might be super ability. It all depends how you look at it. Again, it's perhaps a sad reality, but it's a reality. In a sense, it's a reality. We talk about challenges that befall. This person can be fired, but it's only another opportunity that's presenting themselves to this person and knocking on his door. And if he wouldn't have exited the other room, he would never enter the new room. He would never look to enter a new room. So again, challenge or opportunity. It's all how we look at it. Some people would just lay back and become totally, depressed. Some people look at it. So it's how we look at it. So this is really all logically. This is not even touching on the concept of purpose in the world or the concept of God in the world. This is simply a logical explanation how every single human has the ability to look at something differently. We took that to the next level. We took it also to social norms of the world, where even when a person adapts a new lifestyle, and there seems to be a culture clash. There seems to be a clash between the way I look at things and the way the world looks at things. Hey, so they're going to look at me that way. Really? They're going to look at you that way? Who said? Why did you decide they're going to look at you that way? We talked about that. That's also, I decided they're going to look at me that way. That's true. I can actually also help them see me authentically if I will help myself be seen authentically, in the sense of expressing who I really am and not allowing them to see me for the looks of people do judge based on what they think. So if you know they think, help them look at you authentically. And we talked about that as well, right? So that's all about culture. There's no real clashes. There are no real clashes. Sometimes you go into a restaurant and you think if you're going to say something, kosher food, for example, they're going to look down on you. But hey, they understand vegan. They just don't understand. They have no awareness about kosher. Explain to them. They now respect it. So really, what was the problem? It wasn't culture clash. It was simply ignorance. It was simply a lack of awareness. Once the awareness is there, there is no real clash. The clash is in your mind. The clash is in your perception. The clash is your own self-created, man-made clash that you created, and you are putting yourself into your own pit, and you don't go out of it. Just let go of it. So really, a lot of these clashes that we create are created. They're not real. We continued on with the idea of being proud. A person has to be proud, and we talked about how the apologetic lawyer versus the proud young 6-year-old. Again, it's all in the mind. If you're proud of yourself, then you're able to face anything, anywhere, no matter what, where, what, why. You're not apologetic. This is who you. I'm not selling it for cheaper. This is the price. This is what it is. A good salesman knows that. Any good, self-respecting person knows that. You just have to know who you are. Be authentic with yourself, and there are no real clashes. Now, I want to take it to the next two areas. The next two areas are the business practices of the world and scientific proof. Number 4 and 5 and 13, and then we'll continue on to today's class. So some people say, okay, that's great. You can deal out with social norms of the world. And we actually talked a little bit about the business practices, but I want to show how it flows all in the same area. It's all how I see it. Simply how I see it. Some people will say, what do you mean? We talked about the idea of a retail store needs to be open on Saturday. This is how things run, really. If Steve Jobs would say, pictures are just printed. This is just how things run, really. There is no such thing as a business practice. The most successful businesses are those that create behavior changes. That's the most successful. Uber, Apple, Waze. They change behavior patterns, how you see things, how you look at things, how you behave. They're the ones that make the most money. It's called innovative. So why are you so afraid of your own behavior changes? Do you not think that perhaps the world will actually adapt that? Look, 1,000 years ago, 100 years, the times of the Romans, there was no such thing as a Shabbos. So the whole world adapts the day of rest. There was no such thing. There are dating. Today they have shadchonim, matchmakers in the secular world, essentially, in the sense of
online?
It depends what kind of sites, but the concept, the authentic concept behind it, which is not letting yourself go into a situation or fall into a situation, but rather anticipate it and kind of do your homework before you enter a situation, is a normal thing. It's not. There's nothing to be embarrassed. This is normal. It's a behavior change in a sense compared to 30 years ago. People said you just have to fall into it. You just have to, just go in the right place and you'll fall. No, people now anticipate. People now realize. People now, in a sense, change their perspective. Perhaps maybe because relationships hit a certain shaky situation where people realize that there's more to relationship than just a shallow, exchange of hello and goodbye. There's a meaning. So if there's a meaning, let's first see if we fit in that meaning too before we enter into other areas where anybody can fit into. So 30 years ago that might have sounded like you're crazy. Just if you have a good time together, it's all good. And today it's a normal accepted practice. So there are a lot of examples how if you're comfortable and you recognize the true merit behind it, what are you apologetic about? To come along and say that's the practice of the world is not true. There is no real practice of the world. The world is constantly evolving and changing. So don't come along and tell me that's the world. That's maybe the world the way you perceive it today, or maybe many perceive it today. But I see things differently, and I'll explain to you how I see it, and maybe tomorrow they're going to be behaving like me. Maybe tomorrow they're going to adapt my lifestyle. So why should I not be authentic with myself? I'm embarrassed. So that's my fault. So it goes into business practices too. It can go into success too. People say, well, you won't be successful if you won't cheat in business. You won't be successful if you don't cut corners. That's not true. Who determined that is what success is? You decided. I can show you many people are successful and they don't cut corners. And I can explain to you logically how if you cut corners, you won't make money. So you decided to put yourself into a certain paradigm of looking at the world in the sense of this is how you have to. Everybody says this is how it has to be. Everybody thinks that this is what it has to be. It's the way you want it to be, not the way it has to be. There's no such thing as the world has to be. The world is how you want it to be. So no one can come along and tell me this is the world and you're clashing. You don't make sense. You don't make sense. Who said you don't make sense? Why me? You. And then, what? What's on your mind?
I'm just thinking about, I'm thinking about what you're saying about like Apple, for example, or successful businesses and the relationship between, I think on the one hand, you're completely, I think you're completely right, and it does make sense. It's just that there's also this other dimension to thinking that way, because it's also a question of who is thinking that way, because someone could be thinking that way and they're still having a bad effect, They're still successful, but they're still having a bad effect. Like, you read these things about the percentage of sociopaths that are in leading positions, Like, it's a really high percentage compared to the rest of the population. And I don't know, it's just interesting that, I was reading recently a book on sociopaths, and apparently it says that, like, sociopaths never see, like, they never see the danger in a situation. They only see the opportunity. They only see the silver lining. And that really got me to thinking about the whole, okay, so where's the line between thinking positively and saying the world is what I created, and there are consequences, real consequences on human beings as a result of, you know what I mean? Like I don't know. That's
a very, very, very valid point. You bring in a very valid point. It's funny how we call them crazy people. Remember I talked about in last class. I said, is passion a sickness? Because society tends to look at passion. Look, you just demonstrated it as a sickness. You're crazy. You're nuts. How can you not see the pitfalls? How can you not see the dangers involved? And you're right, it's very tricky.
Like Apple, a lot of people, it's a good example because it's very successful on one hand. They have an amazing work culture within the U.S. on one hand, but if you look, there's a lot of criticism about, like, look what they're doing to these kids in China. You know what I mean? Like,
so here we have to differentiate. Mm-hmm. There's differentiation between. Okay, so there's 2 points here. Let's put China's a behavior pattern, and the business model is a vision. What's the difference between the two? Business model means to say, I'm looking at the world. People print pictures. Okay, good for them. That's not the way it has to be. I can change that. I see a world where people have digital. It's a vision. See a vision.
Right, like, okay.
It's a vision. I live in a world where people work 7 days a week. I see differently. People have taxis. I see a world where cars can become taxis. Let me work that out. I see cell phones. I see cell phones becoming printers. I see that world. It's a vision. It's a vision. So visionary people are crazy. Why do we call them crazy? Because right now the norm is that taxis are not cars. You're nuts. If I look in a dictionary right now, the dictionary tells me cars are not taxis. These are two separate entries in the dictionary. There's taxis and there's cars. Don't mix up the two. You don't know what we're talking about. Vision is crazy. What's crazy? Crazy means not normal. What's not normal? It's not what most people do today. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I'm okay. I'm okay with that. Why am I okay with that? Because I see something. If I go on vacation and I see beautiful scenery, right? And I come back and I talk to you about it, you tell me you're crazy. You never saw it. I saw it. You don't see it. I do see it. So you're right. In your eyes, I'm crazy because you don't see it, but I do see it. Come back to me in a year when you go on vacation and you'll agree to me that it exists. So you're right. If you hear about something, it's crazy. But if you see it, it's real. Vision means to say you see it. The visionary has to be a real person. If he doesn't really see it, imagine.
Okay, you're distinguishing them between the vision and the implementation of the vision, right? You could, two people could have both a brilliant vision, but one of them could be implementing it in a sociopathic way, and then the other one is not, right? The other one is still like retaining their ethics and their values and their morals.
Correct. So that's where I want to get to. I want to get to exactly. No, that's exactly where I want to get to. First point is the vision, and vision is crazy, but vision is real. I want to explain why it's crazy, but it's not crazy in the sense of going to a hospital and being hospitalized, but crazy in the sense of supernormal. Right? That's what a visionary really is, because he saw something. If you see it, it's real for you. And then when you implement something, you have to have values. You have to know how to implement. Just because I'm a visionary doesn't mean I have to step on you. It doesn't mean I have to kick you. It doesn't mean I have to throw someone out of their house. It doesn't, there's a way of behaving. So you're right. The business practices in the sense of how behaving, they're wrong. There's values and there's ethics. And Apple can be as successful without stepping on others as well. So those are two separate discussions. But and the reason why I brought it out is because Torah has certain values. Torah has certain values and ethics. And no one can come along and tell me that those values and ethics are a contradiction to success. Or they're a contradiction to the norm of the world. Okay? Because I see things differently. You can't tell me this is the world. And I gave an example back in a B&H. Right? People are going to tell me retail stores are impossible to make money if they don't open on Shabbos. And that's like it's a saying. It's a standard practice, if you want, of the world. Retail store sales, shopping is done mostly on Saturday. So if I'm going to open a store that's retail, shopping, and close on Saturday, I'm not going to make money. B&H is the most successful one in cameras and whatever. How? They don't close. They close on Shabbos. So behavior patterns change. Once you have a great product, logically you could understand people will start evolving around you. Not always do you have to evolve around them. So who said it has to be that way? You decided it has to be that way. You didn't let yourself allow the change. So really it starts with me. That's what I wanted to bring out. It starts with me. If I'm determined and I'm confident with myself, then I won't be facing these, it's impossible. Well, no, not true. Things can change. Logically. This is all logically. And the fourth point is scientific proof. Someone's going to come along to you and say, there's scientific proof against what Torah says. It's not true. Number one, I can show you many scientists, and then we can ask why, whose science helped them come to Torah. And I can tell you a few simple examples for the layperson like me. Technology is a beautiful tool to help us come closer to the idea of ayin roya v'oizen shemas. There's an eye that sees and an ear that hears. It used to be a belief, and today it's a reality. I mean, see, NSA has ways of listening to me, so the guy doesn't have ways of listening to me. What's the big deal? Well, 30 years ago we didn't think that way. We even think that way today. How amazing is that? We think, and our perspective, the way we see things is, yeah, of course people are listening to me right now. What do you mean? I'm in a room alone. No, there's someone that listens to me. That was a crazy thing to think like years ago. You're not normal. How's someone going to hear you from here? You're closed room. No. This why you're going to start imagining, and whatever we imagine is probably a tip of the iceberg of what really goes on. What really goes on in technology. The technology that they have today is crazy, and whatever we know is only what they let us know, right? Right? So today we're convinced. And isn't that amazing? Technology helps me see God. Why is it negate? There is no science. On the contrary, the more a person has the ability to dig into the depth and the complicated, the depth of the world that we live in, and the same thing with doctors. The more you get to know a human, the depth of a human is so complicated. The nature and the behavior patterns, and as much as I know, there are areas in the brain that we still don't know, and the areas, right? And as much as they know, they're baffled by certain things. Like, just how does that happen? The more you know, the more you don't know. The more you don't know, the more you realize there's something there. So does it bring me closer or further? The more my knowledge digests, and the more I realize this teacher is an amazing. Look what he created over here. It's the closer I become to him. Of course, there's a gap, but the more I'm pulled into it, which is what science, logic is pulling us, the closer I become. So why does someone say it's a clash of science? Not a clash. Perhaps the scientist decided before he made or wrote his book on theory that it's a clash. So he came with the outcome of it's a clash, just like we always do. Whenever we want something, the difference between an excuse and a reason. Excuse is when I first decide the outcome. I find some reason why I decided that way. It's an excuse. I decided, as soon as I came into the room, I decided that's what I want. Then I had to I can't just say I'm a behemoth, I'm an animal that just does things. I explained to you why I decided that way. That's not the reason why I decided. I decided because some self-interest, politics, like you said the last time, right? Politics is it's a good example of excuses, not reasons. Politics is a great example of excuses and not reasons. There are no reasons in politics. It's called self-interest. There's no reasons. If it would be a reason, we all sit at the same table. There will be no parties. If it's a reason, it'd be like the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin's no parties. The Sanhedrin had 71 members. There were no parties. I'm already deciding what I'm going to say before I even start the discussion because I belong to a party. There's no parties. If you're looking for a logical discussion, then take away all your parties, throw it out the window, and have a discussion. No, I already have to say something because I belong. So you're not real. The whole concept of politics is fake. It's not real discussions. And scientists are sometimes the same. They belong to a certain way of thinking, so they'll never come to an objective discussion and solution and theory. They're not independent thinkers. Sometimes they have to see things based on their boss, sometimes based on the paper they're printing into, and sometimes based on their personal life that they don't want to come to face with certain realities, so they don't say certain things, and they'll never say certain things. But science as an objective science, as logic, of course it brings you closer. Not further. Someone really explores science as logic. Logic helps you, brings you closer. Nature, I call it the big world and the small world. Whether it's the big world, nature, the big world, or the small world, our world. It only brings us closer, not further. Why should it bring us further? Who said it brings us further? Only closer. So that brings us to the idea of class number 13, which is that it's all in the head. It's really all in the head. Someone's going to come along and say there's a clash. It's because they created the clash. They created a clash, whether it's in their self, whether it's in the social norms of the world, whether it's in the business practices of the world, or whether it's in scientific proof. There is no such thing as a clash. The scientist already decided what his outcome will be before he even engaged in the scientific proof. We decided the clashes before we even engage with whoever we engage in. Because we decided they don't like us. We decided our practices are not accepted. Who said? It's really based upon how we decide to engage. Great. So now we can go to step 2.
So, Rabbi, so it
Yeah.
really comes to the point where everybody who wants to prove something, they always prove what they want to do. So the ones that say, vaccinations are not good for you, they always prove, and they have 1,000 examples why they're not good for you. The ones that say they're good, so that in everything, particularly in the world of medicine, you can see that very, very clearly, which leaves the individual in a very bad place, because then then who do you trust? Who you're saying, okay, so let's forget about the parties and let's see who can be authentic. Well, who can?
Very good. Very good question.
Right, who can?
Very good
Who
question.
should I?
Right. What's the message?
Very good question.
And I really think that for many things, like I would say the Rebbe is somebody who's authentic, right?
Oh, very good question. Very good.
So the Rebbe is like you listen to the Rebbe and you know that he's really thinking for the best of not only the Jews but the world.
Very good. So this is step 2. You realize your question? It's a great question. Now, first we have to establish that there's no real concrete world out there that clashes with me. It's everybody's perspective. That leads us to the question: if it's everybody's perspective, so then I'm lost.
I am.
So where do I go? First we have to determine and establish, because that's the world we live in, that we have these preconceived notions of how the world exists, and this is just impossible. So first we have to shatter and destroy that preconceived perspective. There's a clash. There's no clash. Then you ask yourself, 1 second, if I'm really objective, so there's so many things, so where do I belong? Or, if you wish, we can phrase it differently. So are there really so many people? And if there's smoke, there's a fire. There's so many people that get it wrong. Is there nothing in the world that suggests of some kind of clash? Is it really 100% our own block, or is there some kind of block also in the world? In a sense, we ask that question too. But we can only ask that question after we when you have a balloon, it's really inflated. All you need is a little needle, and the balloon pops. Right? There are a lot of balloons out there. They're inflated. People decide that there's a clash. People have to pop that balloon. Now we can blow a new balloon. Now we can have a proper discussion. Now we can have. So what's really going on? So what is really a proper perspective? And here the real question is, the word purpose has to come in. See, until now, we've been observing the world and saying the world has its say. The world has a certain way of how it suggests we should behave. But now we have to say, so 1 second, so what is the identity of the world? What is it? And in a sense, there's a kind of conundrum here. On one hand, we do live in a world that doesn't shout out that there's a God. We don't live in a world that it shouts out. Right? It does shout out voicemails. It doesn't shout out. It doesn't shout out that there's any creator. Right? There's no such thing. So we do live in a world that doesn't push us towards God. Purpose. It doesn't push us away. So what is it? Is it power? So the real question is, what is it? So there's a real question here. Your question is even deeper than you're saying it. You're asking the question in the sense of, so what do I do? I'm taking the question a step further, and I'm saying, so 1 second. So what is this world? If the world is, you can't be nothing. You've got to have an identity. So what are you? The way I look at it is the way like you said. So what's the real healthy way that I should have my children? Should I have a shot? There's got to be a real way. You can't just say, oh, that's the way he thinks. That's the way he thinks. And everybody's, what's the real way? What's the real answer? So what is it really? So there's a real question here. So here we got to address what is really the identity. You're asking in the sense of health, right? Which is a isolated area of knowledge where we also see two perspectives coming, and each one just says their own thing and finds proofs. And the real question is, what is it really? And I'm asking this. Exactly. And let's take it to the ultimate question: the identity of the world. Good. That's the second phase. So this one I called So this is class. This is number 14. Yesterday we talked about it's all in the head. This one I call the world is an idea. It's not a jungle. A jungle, everybody does what they want. In jungle, you do what you want. You have your perspective. I have my perspective. We fight. We clash. There's no real identity in a jungle. The world's not a jungle. There's an idea behind it. As a matter of fact, everything is an idea. Everything has an idea behind it. The question is what the idea is. And that's what we're going to discuss. But there's an idea here. You can call it purpose. And the number one selling books are purpose. Because in the end of the day, that's the answer to the question. So now we can discuss purpose. Now this is not necessarily logic. Or it's logically understood, but it takes a sense. In a sense, it's going to take, the example I'll give for this is like the swimming we had, right? So the student, as a swimmer, is afraid to jump into the water. You're never going to logically explain to him what it feels like to be in the water. You have to jump into the water. So there's a moment of jumping. In order to jump, you have to address his fears and help him let go of, his firm position, standing on wherever he is, and explain to him that he should entertain the thought of letting go. There's another, but then he has to jump. Once you jump, you'll realize it actually makes sense. And swimming in the water is enjoyable, and it's just part of who you are. But there's a need of jump. There's a need to jump. So you're right. In the sense of jumping to purpose, there's a need to jump. But once you're there, it'll make sense. And let's talk about what it is. Okay, let's talk about what purpose means. So first I talk about looks versus ideas. Number 2 over here. It's a common topic. Many people judge things by the look. What defines? Don't judge a book by its cover. What does that tell you? The idea defines the look. Looks don't define. Looks are expressions. Expression means that there's something behind it. So that helps us a little bit. This conundrum is really the conundrum of the world. There are a lot of things that we come in touch. The apples and oranges for the student in the math. Remember the math teacher comes in the classroom and there were 2 students, and the student, he said, I want to try to explain to you 1 + 1 is 2. He tells them there's 2 apples, 1 + 1, 2 apples. And the student's like, and when he asks him, what about 2 oranges? Oh, I only know about apples, not oranges. Right? Remember the story? So you have this, you have that, the looks and not messages and ideas behind it. Don't get stuck. Try to find an idea behind it. Many times we get stuck with the looks and we don't think about the idea behind it. So that helps us put into context what happens in this world. There are those who get stuck with the looks. There's nothing going on over here. Yeah, just like Steve Jobs. He didn't get stuck in the looks. He wanted ideas and he redefined the world. This is just 2 kinds of people. Some people get stuck in looks. Some people look for ideas behind them, and then they can revamp the look. They can change their perception of the same thing that we're looking at. The same 2 apples. One child sees it. Hey, that's apples, oranges, bananas, pears. It's all the same. 1 + 1 is 2. It's the same lot. I'm not in a different world than the teacher. I'm in the same world. I can actually see it in the apples and the oranges. He's saying it logically. Sometimes the children still have to count their fingers. So they're still like stuck in their world of touch. They can't just think 1 + 1 is 2. So they're stuck. Fine, it takes a time until you actually let go. Not fingers, not apples. It's an idea. 1 + 1 is 2. I got it. Right? So it takes time until you actually graduate. But that's normal. So the problem of smoke, the smoke fire, why there's so many people that don't get it, it's normal. It's very normal. It's not a problem. It's very normal. We have that in every area. So now let's get to purpose. So what is the purpose? So what's the purpose? What's going on here? And here we have the answer. Let me back up. Remember in the beginning, first, you went there in the beginning. So first, let's go to, so here the question is, what's the world, right? I'll tell you 2 ways how to look at the world. Just like the 1 +, I'm going to give the same, I'm going to take the example of math and play it out with the existence of the world. So I'm going to do exactly like the math teacher did with math and apples, and we'll play that out also with the existence of the world and how we feel today. So most of us would say, what's that? You have two kinds of people. You have a reserved person and you have an open person, right? Behavior pattern. What's a reserved person? A reserved person is someone when you come in touch with them, they don't tell you who they are. They're closed and they're not talking. They're very reserved. So you can scream and yell, you can talk till you're blue in the face. They just don't respond. So you don't know who they are. Most people come in touch with this world and we think Hashem is reserved. I'm talking, he's not answering me. I don't see. Where is he? Right? So we have this, and that's like the looks and idea behind it. We have this, where is he? If he's here, let him talk to me. When I have a miracle, what do most people say? If he would show himself to me, if there'd be a miracle, I know he's here. If he would talk, if he'd be open and more expressive and socially more adaptive to my kind of language, then I know he's here. But right now, he's like reserved. Comes along citizen, explains. Look at the children with the apples and the oranges. What happened over there? The children also think the teacher's crazy. Numbers, logic, you're nuts. If you can touch something, if you can eat it, it exists. If it's red, bright red, I see it, it's there. You're in your mind, you're a dreamer. 1 + 1 is 2 because there's a cause and effect. These guys are crazy adults. They're not normal. They're just blown people. What did the teacher do? The teacher demonstrated to the child, right there, look at those apples that you talked about. I'm going to show you the adult is found in the apple. I'm going to bring my world of logic and your world of touch and feel. I'm going to demonstrate to you that you and me are one. But I don't want to demonstrate it to you that you should lose your child's feeling. I'm going to let you still be a child. You're still going to play with that apple. You're still going to touch it. And I'm going to show you how when you touch it, you're actually counting, you're actually using numbers. My idea is invested in that apple. The idea doesn't have to be purely an idea. Ideas can be invested in areas where it now is able to, now I can talk to the child too. The child really doesn't get numbers, but I can talk to him in his physical touch and feel defined world, and I can show him that I relate to him in his world. It's exactly what Hashem did with us. Listen carefully. We talked about this many times, but here's like the punchline. He created a world. There's a world before this world. Soul is like, spirit, crazy people. We're out of touch. Touch and feel. What's physical? Physical is defined by touch and feel, place and time, which really is the idea of it's set in stone. It's a box. There are dimensions. There's a weight. There's a height. Don't tell me it is. What? Beyond what? Right? So that's the world we live in. Hashem created our world, our nature is a mirror that enables us to understand Him. Look what we did the past few classes. We've been discussing the power of Ratzon, power of desire, passion. Essentially, it has no space and time and restriction. What did we just say a second ago? There is no real set in stone person who's just stuck. Really? Isn't that contrary to everything we're used to defining? If you're here, you can't be there. No, I can do everything. What do you mean you can do everything? I thought you only here. I thought you only have that. He embedded into our own psyche the concept of God, allowing us to understand Him. He didn't want angels to understand Him. He wanted nature to understand Him. So you know what nature is? Nature is one big parable, one big example. It's like an apple and orange. If you want, you can touch it and feel it. And if you want, you can see the idea behind it. It's really up to us. And when we see the purpose, there's going to be a major difference between someone who looks at nature as a purpose. As a teacher. Nature is a teacher. God is a teacher. Nature is the parable, is the example. And it's up to us as a student to open that up and see. Remember we talked about a student? A student has to be hungry. If a student's not hungry, they're not going to ask. And if they're not going to ask, they're never going to get it. Some students in that classroom left with apples and oranges. And they went home and ate pears. And they had bananas, and they just never got it.
So you're saying nature is our apples and oranges.
Yeah, exactly.
It's ours.
This is our apples and oranges.
To be able to
figure out God. Everything in nature, and let's go through a few examples just to show you there's a pasuk called Mibsari Echze Elika. From my flesh I will see God. He's not reserved. God is not reserved. He invested himself in nature to the extent that from within nature I will get him. That's what a real teacher does. A real teacher is not absent. A real teacher invests himself. In Hebrew, the term tzimtzum, some people think is absence, and some people realize it's investment. The ultimate teacher invests himself. Now it's really in the hands of the students. What do we have over here? I want to highlight what we did over here. There was stage 1, and in number 14, I highlight in the handout over here. I highlight these points. In stage 1, I called it overcoming the block. I'll show you in the handout in 1 second. I want to highlight these 2 keywords. In stage 1, it was overcoming the block. Please, Mr. Student, Mrs. Student, don't get caught up with apples. I'm giving you an example now. Remember, try to dig further. In stage 2, the student has to recognize there's a purpose. When he recognizes a purpose, he has a whole different view on the apples. He suddenly starts thinking, why is it red? Why is it round? A real example is perfect. In the apples and oranges, it's not an example. It's not a perfect example. But a real example, Ratzon, for example, the power of a desire, is a beautiful example on God. And there are other examples too that give us, can you imagine, giving a mortal, giving a human being, people like us, who we're used to looking at the world as time and space, that we should get the concept of beyond time and space? That doesn't make sense. But he did it. And it's so normal. And it's so normal that you don't even need a religious person to get it. He embedded it into logic. How amazing is that? So is God investing himself, or is he reserved? It's the ultimate connection. He's giving his essential being beyond time and space into time and space of logic. That's beautiful. But it's up to the student. In Hebrew, it's called Achdus Hashem, the oneness of God. There is no real contradiction. There's another term in Hebrew, Tachtoinim and Alyonim, the upper worlds and the lower worlds. There's no real division. But the student has a job of learning and adapting to that kind of perception. There's a story. Let me highlight this with a story. So there's a young boy. It's a tzaddik, and I forgot his name. Maybe someone here knows the name. So he was a smart kid, like always. And so they asked him as a child, so where's God? Tell me where he's going. It's a cute story, but I want to bring out the message. So he turns around and he tells them, first you tell me where he's not. Then I'll tell you where he is. It's cute. You know what really it is? This is the difference between perspective. When we talk about perspective, I hit a challenge. 2 people have a challenge. Something happens in life. One person calls it coincidence, and one person says, what kind of lesson can I learn from that? Lesson? Yeah, lesson is when there's purpose. Coincidence is when it's jungle. It's a huge difference. Tell me where he is jungle. Yeah, tell me where do you belong. Tell me where he's not is, what do you mean? It's a purpose. Where is he not? It's not just a play of words. It's 360 degrees different than mind. What's simple by you, and what's something that you have to seek an answer for? What's the norm, and what's the question? That's called a change of perspective. Once we recognize there's a purpose, the questions change. Our encounters in life change. We respond differently when we hit certain encounters or challenges. A regular person is going to say, it's a coincidence, I'll push on. That you can find that in any motivational speaker. And someone who realizes there's a purpose is going to add a notch to that. He's going to say, there's a purpose of that. What can I get out of that? There has to be a purpose. There's no doubt in my mind this is my good. Because why? God is not here to drown me. Remember the example we gave in criticism? The student in the school, and the teacher tells him, criticism is here to help you, not to drown you. I'm here to help you. So once you realize there's a purpose, the teacher is here. He's giving me a purpose. Why did he give me that apple? He's just throwing apples at me? What, he's busy? He's lazy today to teach? Why did he throw apples at me? No, this is a case study. This is something I know he wants me to learn. So it's up to me how I look at it. The other one's going to say, ignore the teacher. There's something there, but, go on in life. That's just the motivational. Go on in life. So it's an apple. Go on in life. Big deal. You have more to you. That's great. That's step one. But then if you have the notion of purpose, you're going to see something even more than that. That's the difference between when you incorporate purpose. And the purpose behind the world, which is Hashem, what is that? There's a saying that the Torah is the blueprint of the world. What do you mean the Torah is the blueprint of the world? That's the idea behind the world. You want to know an idea? Like you said, who's the authentic person? Only the Creator. When you pointed to the Rebbe, same idea. Only Kedusha, only the Creator can actually determine a purpose. We are facing the apples, and we have an added advantage. The teacher actually gave us a manual and told us how to study that apple. We can decide to open it or not. But that manual will allow us to see the apple as a case study of math, as a way of entering the world of logic, rather than getting stuck in the world of touch and feel. So that manual is purpose, is blueprint, and it's ultimate good. No one can ever tell me, you're missing out on life with that manual. No, that is life. You're saying missing out because you're stuck in touch and feel, and you're saying I'm wasting my time with logic because now I'm not going to have a time to play with the bananas in the corner. You're missing out on life. You don't get the picture. You're stuck. That's the first step, letting go of what's not allowing us to see the bigger picture. Once you realize that you have to find, so who's the picture? The only one who can define the picture is the one that made the picture. And not only did he make the picture, he gave us a manual. That manual is ultimate good. I'm going to finish up with the last example, because this is like class number 10 we had this. What do we talk about? We talk about health. How the kashrus, eating kosher, has health benefits to it. So someone's going to say that's the reason of kosher, for the health benefits. No. Something that's ultimate good is good everywhere. If I'm giving you the Torah is the manual for life, it's not just spiritual life, for physical life too. It's simply to have a good life. It's a manual of life, period. Of life. Human life, living here. You want to be able to know how to do it, how to have the best. That's what it is. It's not, the word spiritual is a contradiction to Torah. Because the word spiritual is isolating it and saying, oh, it's only good for certain things. Good, so then, who said you're good for everything? If you go to a doctor who's holistic, they know everything. The more you know. If you only find isolated, maybe you're going to be wrong somewhere. No, you got it all wrong. It's a blueprint. We'll continue in the next class, and we'll bring out how this ultimate good, now that we got the paradigm of teacher and student, now that we see the paradigm applies itself to the world, now we see the combination of the teacher's world and the student world, because the student is hungry, they're able to connect. Now we can finally finish off the next class and then give a review of how this applies to the question everybody asks, bashert versus hard-earned. Many people say it's bashert, so let God do it. Many people say, what do you mean? I have to work in it. But now we can get the proper combination of the two. So once we realize the world has a purpose, and once we realize there's a manual, then we can see what's our role in the manual and what's his role. He gave us a manual for us to do. It means we have something to do. But at the same time, he's involved. So where exactly do we have the balance? But only after we have a proper vision of the world can we enter into that phase of that question. I'll finish with that next time.